Here's the truth that most people won't tell you. It's not your English that's holding you back. It's more likely to be your communication skills, how you connect with other people, even cultural differences that you're not aware of. So I've helped dozens of non-native English speakers improve their communication skills, which helps them to get jobs, promotions, scholarships, new leads, subscribers, and also more speaking opportunities. And the longer that I do this, the more clear it becomes that vocabulary and grammar for an intermediate to advanced English learner isn't going to help you very much. In this video, I'm going to talk about 9 things that are actually stopping you from succeeding, and these apply to native speakers just as much as they apply to non-native English speakers. Number 1, waiting for perfect English before speaking up. I used to work with this client. She was from Taiwan, and she had an amazing vocabulary range. She was very well read. She loved reading, and she would use words that I don't really use, that most native speakers I know don't use, even in professional settings. But she used them in a way that made her sound very articulate most of the time. It sounds great, and I really enjoyed that it was an extension of her personality. However, she was terrified of speaking up in meetings. She was so afraid of making a mistake, which is really interesting because her perfectionist trait, the trait that actually encouraged her to learn tons and tons of new vocabulary, is the same thing that's stopping her from being able to speak up in meetings. Now, what's more useful? Being able to use words like facetious, or being able to speak up and share your opinion in a meeting. So we worked together for a few months, and it really came down to her ability to just let go a little bit and not be so afraid to make mistakes. And she barely made mistakes, but when she did, eventually she became more comfortable with it. You cannot perfect the English language. You will never be perfect at it, but you do not need to be perfect in order to crush it in an English-speaking environment. Number 2, this is an interesting one, being too polite or a people pleaser. In many Eastern cultures, you are taught to be humble, to respect your elders, to wait your turn, to not speak out of turn. It's really interesting because these can potentially cause you issues in international environments. What happens is that if you're working with native speakers, they become accustomed to you always being polite, always saying yes, thank you. And you become a little bit of a pushover. They're not going to give you an opportunity to share what you think. They're not going to give you the opportunities to take the lead at all because they don't see you as having that quality. And this is very subconscious. They're not doing it consciously. So being too polite will cause a number of issues. And the big one is that you may miss out on getting credit for your work and your ideas. You may end up doing way more work than other people, and you'll never be able to rise up to beyond a certain level because managers love people who take on extra work. I know that because I used to be a manager, and although it is unfair and it's not great, we will ultimately have to do what we have to do, and we will give the work to the people who are willing to take it. So you'll be my favorite person, you'll be the manager's favorite person, but you'll be limiting your potential, and that's just the truth. So the tip, don't be too polite, be appropriately polite, but be aware of what it is that you're doing. If you feel like you are being too polite, get some feedback. You can get some feedback from us in our community, which is free to join if you want to talk more about communication skills. Very similar to being too polite is mistake number 3, which is not setting boundaries, not really being able to say no. Now, there are huge cultural reasons why saying no to a superior can be really, really difficult, and it's not your fault. But just be aware of it. Some native speakers struggle with this as well. It's not easy to say no to people. Now, here's a nice little framework that I came up with called SILK, which can help you to say no more politely. So it goes like this. S is show respect. I is identify constraints, L is link to shared goals or values, and K is keep the door open. So here's a quick example. If your manager comes in and says, hey Ben, I've got some more work for you. How does that sound? And you want to say no politely, but you're struggling to say no, here's a way that you can do it. So first, you can say, hey, thanks so much for thinking of me. It must mean that you trust me a lot. I can't take anything else on at the moment. My schedule is completely full. But I understand that if you're giving this to me, then it must be urgent and it must be important. So is there any chance I could take care of this for you next week? Or maybe John could have a go at it because I think he's got a slightly lighter schedule than mine because I was helping him with something earlier on. Not to throw John under the bus, but you can see there that there's a bit of padding and there's some validation. There is some respect being embedded into that and should lead to a better result than if you just directly said no. Mistake number 4, not validating. This is a really interesting one because this is very cultural. So in Australia, the UK, even the US, a lot of Western English-speaking cultures, we have a culture of validating what other people say. We don't really like to say no, and when we're having a conversation with someone, we try to be agreeable. And if you're not agreeable, then it becomes a little bit difficult to talk to, and typically we don't like it, especially in the UK and Australia. A great example is in Australia, we say this phrase like, yeah, nah.
Yeah, nah means no. Nah, yeah means yes. You can say yeah, nah, yeah. Can you put tomato sauce on eggs? Yeah. Nah, yeah. You could do nah, yeah, nah. Is Starbucks good coffee? Nah. Yeah, nah.
Yeah, nah, you might have heard of that before. We say yeah before we say nah. Yeah is the validation of the idea. So, you're saying like, hey man, you want to go get some fish and chips? Yeah, nah, I'm kind of busy. So there are many different ways to validate. The simplest ways to validate are just to say yeah, or or just to like nod your head. It shows that you're absorbing what is being said and that you're following along. What's really interesting is that in Taiwan, the way that we validate is a little bit different. In Taiwan, people will say But if you do that in Australia, it's considered to be a little bit strange or rude. Better forms of validation are really to listen, like active listening skills, to listen what someone's saying, to actually build on that idea as well. That shows a lot of respect to the idea, and to continue the conversation in a linear way. So if someone brings up the topic of hot dogs, then you keep talking about hot dogs. You talk about how much you like hot dogs. You ask them more questions about hot dogs. These are some ways that we can validate what someone is saying, and it's extremely important. The reason I bring this up is because in a lot of other cultures, validation is not so important, and it's not as common. But if you're working with someone, especially from the UK or Australia, validation, incredibly important. Mistake number 5, stressing about your accent. Don't stress about your accent. Your accent's cool, and it is a marker of you and your culture. The accent's only an issue if it makes it hard for someone else to understand, which can be the case. But before you go on the mission of changing your accent, I would highly recommend that first, you practice moving your mouth more. There are some really cool exercises that you can do. One cool one is actually like you grab your tongue and you talk like this. And if you can talk like this, you will practice enunciating your words much more clearly. And that's one really quick way to improve your pronunciation. You can also do things like slowing down your rate of speech. You can take purposeful pauses, and a range of other little strategies that can support how clearly it is that you speak. Now, an interesting statistic is that if you started learning English as a teenager, it's very, very unlikely that you're going to be able to remove your accent completely, even if you do thousands and thousands of hours of practice. So I wouldn't recommend going down that route unless you really, really need to. For most people, clarity is key. So focus on clear speech. Don't worry about your accent, and be proud of your accent. An accent is a very cool way to start a conversation. People be like, hey, where are you from? And if you can have a kind of cool international accent, then it may prompt even more interesting conversations. So don't be ashamed of your accent, be proud. Mistake number 6, avoiding high stakes situations. So at your work today, there are likely to be opportunities for you to do small presentations, lead team meetings, maybe do a little like training workshop for new members. Raise your hand for those, get some practice. If you expect to be able to go from never leading a workshop to leading a workshop with 100 people, you're going to be terrified. It's going to be very hard to execute well. So you got to have these steps in between. Now, this is something that I try to create with my community. We have a lot of these different high stakes speaking situations where you can be part of a workshop. You can talk to people that you're unfamiliar with. You can practice giving a speech to strangers. You can practice actually recording yourself as well, which is a form of high stakes speaking. And these are all little steps in between so that when you go and give that speech in front of 100 people, you're not going to be terrified. You're already going to have a lot of muscle memory, and you're going to know how to deal with some of the pressure that comes with it. So don't shy away from high stakes. You have to practice high stakes to get better at giving speeches, doing interviews, and being able to speak well on camera. Mistake number 7, which is self-degradation, which is kind of like trying to be secret vulnerability, but it's not really vulnerability. So let me explain. If you're the kind of person who says things like, oh, like I'm just not very good at this. I'm like, oh, I'm terrible. Oh, I did a terrible job. Oh, the speech sucked. First of all, you're training yourself with terrible self-talk. And so it's no wonder that you lack confidence. But the other thing, which I think is the worst part, is that you're kind of hiding. It's not real vulnerability. Now, if you've heard of Brene Brown, you would have heard her talk a lot about vulnerability and the power of vulnerability as a leader. But saying that you're bad at something is not real vulnerability. Real vulnerability would be saying something like, oh, sometimes I will say that I'm bad at something because deep down I'm looking for people to tell me that I'm actually better so that I feel better for that moment. But deep down, even deeper than that, I'm actually very insecure about my abilities. Right? That's true vulnerability. And if you can own that, that's extremely powerful because it opens up doors for other people to do the same, shows that you're human, helps to build connection. So many reasons why vulnerability is powerful. So don't trick yourself into believing that self-degradation is a form of vulnerability. It's not. Remove that negative self-talk as soon as possible. Replace it with positive affirmations. You can do affirmations, you can do cognitive reframing. There's a whole bunch of strategies that can help you to think in a more positive way. And these are scientifically proven, evidence-based, to have a really big impact on your communication skills, especially in high-stakes situations. Mistake number 8, not using communication frameworks. So I'd never heard of communication frameworks until I started doing some research into impromptu speaking because I wanted to be better at it myself. These are so powerful because they basically create a map in your mind of what you should talk about next. Now, I did a whole video on this previously. You'll see the link somewhere up the top. I highly, highly recommend that you check that out. It's called the Narrow Framework, and it'll take you through a process where you can then master this framework and use it in pretty much any spontaneous speaking situation. Super, super helpful. And the very last one, number 9, undervaluing your unique perspective. You have a superpower compared to your native speaking counterparts because they can only think within one culture, whereas you can think from the perspective of your own culture versus English speaking culture. So it's really important to acknowledge that, to understand more about what those differences are. I'm sure you've picked up a lot already, but be aware of those because they are a superpower, especially if you're working in an international environment, because the native speaker will do well working with other native speakers, but they may not be as culturally sensitive as they need to be able to execute the job well. Whereas you have that sensibility and you will be able to navigate and maneuver because you'll be more aware of the cultural sensitivities. So embrace it, be aware of it, embrace it. So just remember, your English is already good enough, but if any of these 9 mistakes are things that you do, address them immediately. You can do work on those in our community. You can come and have a chat with me about it. You can also do a range of courses and activities that I've set up inside my free community. So come and join us and you won't regret it, I promise.